How's it going, Crusaders? Welcome back to another sermon. Today we're checking out Jesus' identity, and this is going to be part 1 of 3 parts, just going over his identity. As I said, this is going to be a very long, detailed, and intrusive series talking about Jesus, who he was, who he is, and who he will forever be. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this because we've got 5 pages of notes just on part 1 to go over. So, the first thing I want to check out is the stairway to heaven. And it's funny because I felt like I just read this yesterday, and it was probably close to a year ago that I actually read this. So in Genesis 28, verses 10 through 22, Jacob's, after deceiving his father and brother, flees to Beersheba and travels toward Haran, where he will work for his uncle Laban. He stops to rest for a night, using a stone as a pillow, and dreams of a ladder or stairway, whichever you want to decide there, reaching from earth to heaven, with angels moving up and down it. God appears to Jacob at the top of the ladder and reiterates the promise made to Abraham and Isaac, that Jacob's descendants will be as numerous as the dust of the earth, that all nations will be blessed through him, and that God will be with him and protect him wherever he goes, eventually returning him to the land. Jacob wakes up, awestruck by the vision, and dedicates the place the house of God and the gate of heaven. He then makes a vow to God, promising to make God his God, to set up a stone pillar as a marker for God, and to give a tenth of everything that he is given. Finally, Jacob names the place Bethel, meaning house of God. So that's the first thing that I want to check out right there, talking about the stairway to heaven, which is a vision that God placed in Jacob's mind and led to what we know now as the stairway to heaven. The second thing I want to check out, we're going to go over Jesus is the Messiah. In Psalm 110, verses 1 through 7, it describes God's promise to the Messiah, who will be seated at God's right hand, ruling over enemies and serving as a priest forever in the order of a word that I'm going to butcher, over Melchizedek, ultimately conquering and judging the nations. Thirdly, we're going to check out hope is in the Messiah. So Isaiah 9, verses 6 through 7, it prophesies a child, the Messiah, who will bear the government on his shoulders and be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace, promising an eternal reign of peace and justice on David's throne. So, Crusaders, as you can tell, this is a very detailed piece of scripture right here going over his identity. And this is just a bunch of things that he's been called, a bunch of things that he's done, and many different things that prove that he is who he says he is. Nextly, I want to check out God's promises. God promises a king. So in Isaiah 16, verses 4 through 5, the prophet urges Moab to be a refuge for the Lord's people, promising that the oppressor will end and destruction will cease, and that a righteous king will establish a throne in truth and justice. Next, let's check out the righteous one. So in Jeremiah 33, verses 14 through 22, the passage offers hope to a people devastated by loss, promising that God will fulfill his promise to Israel and Judea. God promises to raise up a righteous descendant of David who will rule with justice and righteousness, bringing safety and security to Judea and Jerusalem. God assures that David will never lack a successor to the throne, nor will the Levitical priests ever lack someone to serve before him. Emphasizing the permanence of the roles, God uses the analogy of the covenant with day and night to illustrate with unbreakable nature of his covenant with David and the priest, highlighting the reliability of his promises. The passage rebukes the despair and negativity of the people who believe God has rejected them, emphasizing God's faithfulness and the coming restoration. The passage highlights the importance of righteousness and justice, with the promised ruler being described as one who does what is right and just in the land. The restored nation will bring honor and praise to God, and the nations will fear and tremble at God's goodness and prosperity. The passage underscores God's faithfulness and his ability to bring life out of death, even with things seem lost. Next, I want to check out the empowerment of the Son of Man. So, in Ezekiel 2, verses 1 through 3, God tells Ezekiel to stand on your feet, and God will speak to him. Ezekiel is sent to a rebellious nation that has, let me restart that. Ezekiel is sent to a rebellious nation that has rebelled against me. God emphasizes that the Israelites are obstinate and stubborn. Ezekiel is giving a scroll containing words of lamentation, mourning, and woe. Ezekiel is commanded to eat the scroll, which he does, and finds it sweet as honey. God assures Ezekiel that he will give him the power to speak, even to a rebellious people. Ezekiel is told not to be afraid of the Israelites, of their words. God emphasizes that Ezekiel must speak his words, whether they listen or not. God reminds Ezekiel that Jews are a rebellious people and will not listen. God tells Ezekiel that he will give him the strength to speak his words, even when they are rejected. Israel is taken away by the Spirit to a place where he is to labor. Ezekiel's heart is heavy with the message he is to deliver. Ezekiel then waits 7 days for God's words to have its full effect on him before he decides to pass it on to the exiles. Crusaders, this is a lot of important information. I'm not just putting Bible verses in there. I'm going into detail on the story of all the ways that is described as Jesus is who he says he is, all the different things that people say he was, and all the things that he proved he is. Next, let's check out our eternal King. I do have a little bit of a sore throat, and as you can tell, I apologize. Next, let's check out our eternal King. So, Daniel 7, verses 13 through 14 describes Daniel is a night vision where he sees one like a son of man coming with the clouds of heaven. And this is often interpreted as Jesus. The figure approaches the Ancient of Days, a title often associated with God the Father, and is brought before him. The one, like a son of man, is given dominion, glory, and kingdom, meaning authority, honor, and sovereignty. The passage emphasizes that this domain is everlasting. It will not pass away. The kingdom will not be destroyed. All peoples, nations, and languages are to serve or worship this figure. This passage is part of Daniel's vision of 4 kingdoms represented by beasts, with the final kingdom being destroyed and replaced by the eternal kingdom of the one like a son of man. Next, I want to check out something that is very important. Jesus is human. So Matthew begins his gospel with the genealogy to establish Jesus' rightful place as the Messiah, the promised king from the line of David, and the fulfillment of God's covenant with Abraham. This will be the last thing that I want to check out for today's video on Jesus' identity, part 1. So the genealogy lists key figures in Jewish history, including Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Judea, and David, highlighting Jesus' connection to these important ancestors. The genealogy is structured in a way that emphasizes the fulfillment of God's promises, with the names divided into 3 groups of 14 generations each. By tracing Jesus' lineage back to Abraham and David, Matthew demonstrates that Jesus is the heir to God's promises and the rightful heir to the throne of David. Matthew includes 4 women in the genealogy: Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba, which may highlight the inclusive nature of God's salvation and the upcoming radical inclusivity of Jesus' ministry. The genealogy connects Jesus to the Old Testament, demonstrating that he is the fulfillment of God's promises and the Messiah prophesied in the Old Testament. Crusaders, one thing that is very important that you need to understand, and not even understand, just dive into it, study it, and research it yourself. Jesus is in every single book of the Bible. And he's actually a lot easier to find in every single book than you would imagine. Even in Genesis, he's there. Exodus, he's there. Every single Old Testament book, he's there. His identity is something that you're not going to be able to accomplish with one video unless I was to make a 2-hour long video. So I'm breaking this down into 3 parts. This was part 1, and his identity is definitely something that you really need to explain with great detail and try not to leave anything out. These are not just Bible verses that I'm putting in here and then talking a little bit like our normal sermons. These are detailed stories of who Jesus was, who Jesus is, and as I've said a million times, who he will forever be. So that's all I've got for today on Jesus' identity, part 1. As I said, I forgot my sermons for the vacation, so I wanted to do a video, 3 videos, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, so this will be the last daily video, I guess. But Monday, I will do a Bible study. Next Friday, we'll do the sermon. And then the following Monday, I'm going to contact Never Alone Halfway House and see if we're still good to go for the Wagon Wheel Worship, and then we'll drop off some free Bibles there. So I will catch you all Monday for the Bible study, Crusaders. Thanks.